Authorities say more charges are coming for the suspect in Monday's deadly mass shooting at a Boulder, Colorado supermarket. We know the alleged gunman is being held without bail after making his first court appearance yesterday. His lawyers requested a mental health assessment. Boulder's district attorney says the weapon used in the shooting was purchased legally. He and his team are still trying to piece together a motive. This comes as we continue to learn more about the 10 victims of the attack. Most of them were killed doing something we all do on a regular basis, shopping for groceries. For more, let's bring in Colorado's Secretary of State, Jena Griswold. Madam Secretary, welcome. It's great to have you with us. Sadly, as you know, your state has had its fair share of mass shootings. Why do you believe they continue to happen in Colorado, and what do you think needs to change?
Well, Tanya, thank you for having me. I wish it was on a happier note. Colorado has had its fair share of shootings, but so has the rest of the nation. We've had 2 extremely deadly shootings in the last week or so, and what we need is Congress to act. Congress has failed to act for a whole generation of Americans who now live in a fear to go to the movies or go grocery shopping or send our kids to school. So it's really incumbent that both the state and the federal levels pass sensible gun reforms immediately.
And of course, you are a Democrat and many in your party do want stricter gun laws, but how do you get Republicans on board?
Well, many Americans, both sides of the aisle, want common sense gun reform, including universal background checks. But the federal government has failed to act, and that's largely because many in Congress and the U.S. Senate are thinking more about their reelections and the NRA than the constituents that they represent. So I think it's time as a nation that we really listen to everyday Americans who have to worry to go grocery shopping now, and pass the reforms that we need. Look, states can do a lot. In Colorado, we have extreme risk protections, universal background check, red flag laws, large capacity magazine bans, but it is not enough. So we do need elected officials to do their job and pass the reforms that Americans need so that we can all live peaceful lives.
And Madam Secretary, authorities have not yet said anything about a possible motive or why the alleged shooter chose to open fire in a supermarket 30 miles from his home. But one of his defense attorneys did signal a possible insanity defense. Do you think that a person's mental health should be checked before a gun purchase? And what about throughout their ownership of that weapon?
Well, I believe in the reforms that we have in Colorado, including universal background checks and, different provisions we have to make sure that gun ownership is done in a reasonable way. But at the end of the day, we now have 10 victims from Boulder and surrounding communities whose lives were cut so short, needlessly short, and a community grieving with them. So we do need states to act further. We do need the federal government to do its job so that Coloradans can live our lives without fears. And again, this is not just a Colorado issue. We are seeing this coast to coast, and enough is enough. We need action.
And I want to pivot, if you don't mind, to voting rights while I have you.
Sure.
As you know, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has signed into law a bill that overhauls the state's election laws, despite significant opposition from Democrats and voting rights groups. You yourself recently opposed a bill in the Colorado State Senate that would have altered how the citizens in your state cast their votes in general elections. What did that bill entail? And tell us why you were opposed to it.
Of course. So on the heels of one of the most accessible and safe elections with record turnout on both sides of the aisle from 2020, we are now seeing a tsunami of voter suppression. In 43 states, more than 250 bills have been introduced to take away Americans' voting rights. That includes in Colorado, where there was a piece of legislation that would undo our use of vote by mail for all, cut into early voting, make us have to throw away ballots that weren't counted on election night. And overall, it was intended to suppress voters. And as Secretary of State, I believe American voters, Colorado voters, should choose our elected officials and oppose any measures by elected officials to try to manipulate outcomes of elections by choosing their voters through voter suppression. So we are now on a all hands on deck situation with this massive onslaught of voter suppression across the nation. And it underlines the need for Congress to pass the For the People Act, which is now being considered in the U.S. Senate.
Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.